Hey guys, welcome back to the Terrible 2 podcast for episode 7. Okay. So glad to have you guys back, and if you're new, we're so happy to have you here. Thank you for joining the family, and we hope you stay. I'm excited for this topic today because I'm like, ooh, I'm keeping it a secret.
Yeah, I have no idea what we're going to talk about.
And so it's just going to be, boof, surprise for everybody. So, babe, before we start.
Always.
I do.
Always.
It wouldn't be me.
No, you're right.
It wouldn't be me. I'm the host for today, and my name is Lonnie.
And I'm Teddy.
And we are so, again, happy to have you here. So sorry, it wouldn't be me if I didn't forget to say our names.
Every time.
But yes, if you're new here, Lonnie, Teddy, nice to meet you. Happy to have you. Hope you stay. So the topic for today, babe,
drum roll, please.
is what is the line between toxic and just the rough, tough stage in the beginning that everyone gotta get through? What's that cutoff? That just like, woo, yeah, we made it through that rocky stage, and then also like, no, you should probably break up because that's toxic.
Wow. That is an extremely tough one.
Ooh.
Line between toxic and just struggle. Crazy. I think there are so many aspects to relationship that just right out the bat answers a statement would be generalization. I think you have the easy ones like physical abuse, like if somebody hits you, dip. It's probably not gonna get better. So leave. Okay, so that's easy. That's this. Wow. I assume you have an answer.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Okay, so if we have to discuss the line of toxicity versus struggle, I think it's dependent on a number, like how many times something happens, right?
Okay.
How many times they hang up and manipulate you into calling them back. I think manipulation is a big one. Once you figure out what it is, like what they're doing to manipulate you, I think once you figure that out and you spot it and you communicate that, hey, that was very manipulative of you. Can you stop doing that? And they continue to do that. That's when it transitions from a struggle to where you don't necessarily know you're being manipulated, but it's happening, and you're like, okay, to the point where I guess maybe you figure out you're doing it consciously and not subconsciously.
Yeah,
that's toxic.
So lack of change.
Lack of change is a good one, actually. After having conversations with your partner, you're like, hey, I've noticed this is this. And I guess you can be the toxic one too, not changing.
Yeah, that's true.
So after communication has been had and repetition keeps happening, because the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. So if you have spoken, if you've communicated and you sat down, you talk to each other, and you're like, this feels rough. Every relationship is going to have problems.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like if you go in expecting perfection, you're going to be surprised, by something everyone saw coming. And so I think after communicating about the issues, communicate about the ups as well and the downs, really finding out what's happening. I think, yeah, you're right. If nothing changes, if it continues to be manipulation, it continues to be like there are easy ones, like if it happens, but they're more nuanced ones that, like emotional abuse. Like we said, comparison is the enemy of happiness. If they're comparing you to their ex, they're comparing you to their parental figure, they're constantly comparing you, I think that is toxic. Constantly comparing you to another person or thing is toxic. I guess there's positive comparisons.
Yeah.
But the the negative ones, like they do this better, or this isn't what I'm used. Like, it's okay to say this isn't what I'm used to, but if it's I don't want you to do this anymore, it's not what I'm used to, is toxic. Because again, change is good. So wanting to grow and shift and become different is fine, but not if it's bringing down you as a person, or you're bringing down them as a person.
Yeah.
It's okay to like the cooking of your mother, like your father. You grew up with these people, and that's what you're used to yourself. But excuse me. When you cook for them, they're just like, this is that. This is that. It's terrible. Yeah, it might be, right? And take a cooking class. If it really, like, if you, oh, okay, well, I want to get better in my cooking for you, I would pick up a cooking class. I would look on, and they give you feedback. Not just it's trash, it's trash, it's trash, it's trash. What's the feedback? Do I need more salt? Do I need less salt? More seasonings? Like, between me and you like seasoning and heat more than I do. Yeah. And that's like, when I cook, yeah, there's less seasoning in it. When you cook, there's more. But we've communicated that with each other, and we've met in the middle. Like nobody just you don't just be like, oh, it's trash, it's bad, and I'm annoyed. You communicated, oh, you like more spice. I communicated, oh, I like less spice, because spice hits me like a train. So it's communicating. First of all, communication is a green flag. Okay,
yes, communicate.
Absolutely. So I think a lack of change, and then comparison, constant comparison to other things, other people, who's better than you, like that kind of thing. What else? What do people struggle with in relationships?
Communication.
Yeah.
Compromise. Understanding.
But okay, so not wanting to compromise either, when they always want to be correct. And it's okay to be right, like it's okay to be right. But if they get into a discussion with you without resolution being the goal, that it's like, I'm here to argue.
I know.
Like you're just here to argue. You're here to be right and win. And it's a compromise in a relationship is about you both winning, and like you both losing.
Yeah.
It's not about I win, you lose.
It's about we win, we
both
lose.
cross the finish line together, whether it's first place or second place. So yeah, just wanting you both to win is important. Not always trying to be right and be correct and be the best. It's like, whenever you run into another person, because of your differences, one of you is most likely going to be better at something than the other. So I think what else is there? You said compromise. What else did you say?
I said communication, understanding, being understanding of the person. Boundaries, trauma.
Oh, okay. Boundaries is a big one. When you have set boundaries openly, like it's not your secret boundary that no one knows, and when they cross it, you're like, you crossed my boundaries, I'm out of it. They did not know, and they didn't know that was your boundary set. So when they cross it, you can't put that on them. Like they're obvious ones. Like we're not talking about the obvious boundaries of but the ones that are personal to you. Like I knew someone, and it was like they wanted their partner to get off the phone when they entered the house, like to speak to them, and it's like that's the boundary they set. So if the partner kept coming in and not hanging up the phone, that would be a boundary crossed, and that would lead into toxicity. So when you've openly spoken about a boundary and they continue to cross it, then toxic. And then with the always wanting to win, you run across the opposite of it, where they don't try to understand your perspective. Like and that feeds into the we both want to win kind of thing. Like both of us should win, because your perspective may be correct and right, but you're not willing to hear out the other person. Right? And not trying to understand their background or what they're bringing into the argument or the conversation, and that makes it extremely tough. I was recently in a discussion of perspective and perception, and I trust me, I don't remember. It's such a smooth difference between them, but it's like factors that factor into how you view something are important, and it changes how you judge something in the future.
Absolutely.
Right? So, for example, let's say in the past I had a negative interaction with a teacher, right? And then so from then on, my perspective on teachers is a negative one, right? And you've had a positive interaction with teachers, so now your perspective is a positive one. And so I come out and I'm like, this teacher was mean to me, right? That could be personal and that could be correct. Right? And then you're like, well, no, I don't think all teachers are mean. You know, that could have just been but I'm not willing to hear you out. Like, I'm like, no, I don't want to hear it. You're wrong. Like, because I want to win because the teacher was mean to me, and maybe I've had one or two other interactions where the teacher was mean. So I'm correct. I'm right. Teachers are mean. And so I'm not willing to hear you out about your positive interactions with teachers. That's BS. I don't care. Get out of my face. That's, you're not willing to understand the other person's perspective, the other person's background, the other person's information, anything they put forth into a conversation. You're not willing to hear it. Toxic. You know, so I feel like you're feeding me the points, but everything you're saying does make sense. And I think it's good to recognize when toxicity appears.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because ignorance is bliss, and if you don't know you're in toxicity, go about it that you'll just go about enjoying the worst time of your life without knowing it. You know, and so I think knowing your worth, knowing what you're expecting, can help you define and recognize toxicity. Okay, because it can come in many forms and it comes from many places. And so let's say, so speaking of negative interactions, you run into a negative interaction, then you can set that boundary with your partner. Like, hey, that really didn't sit right with me, or that really hurt my feelings. I didn't like how you reacted. I set that boundary. If they're not willing to understand, right, toxicity, red flag. I think nobody's all green flags. I don't think. No, I don't think anybody's all green flags. I think everybody has the red and the beige, as they're calling them now, and the pros and the cons and all that stuff. So I think, and if they're willing to work on their red flags, that's good, right? Because of upbringing and interactions and stuff like that, we all have a red flag or two or a couple sitting with us, because maybe we're guarded on this, maybe we don't like that, so we're extremely negative whenever that pops up.
Absolutely.
First step is acknowledging that you have the red flag. If you're like, hey, I am the perfect person, I am green flag city, and I'm a walking green flag. Take some time to assess yourself. Right. Like I always say, know your worth, but
at the same time, also know your flaws.
Yeah, you have to take the time to recognize your shortcomings.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I don't know. I think it's
okay.
It's easy. Hold on, real quick. It's easy to be your biggest critic, right? So don't just be like, I'm red flag city. Don't be like I'm green flag city. Don't be like I'm red flag city. Yeah. But know your worth, know what you bring, know what you're looking for, and recognize your pros and your cons. Make a pro and con list about yourself during one of the periods between a breakup, before you jump back into another relationship. Sit down with yourself and see your green and red flags, see your pros and your cons, see what you bring, what you're offering, what your potential is, and what you're looking for somebody to bring, what you're looking for them to have and not have, and what potential, if they don't have all that you're willing to wait for them having to have or whatever, you know? So,
that's it, baby.
You know,
That's it, baby. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
Before I was gonna say before you forget, but you got it.
Mm-hmm.
But before I forget, I enjoyed the fact that you were like pros and cons, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think, I mean, it's not solely this, but I do think that's a part of it. I think the part that creates toxicity is when your cons outweigh your pros,
Mm-hmm.
and not necessarily like that, because some people may have more pros than cons, right? He does this, he does this, he does this, he does this, he does this. He's great, he's sweet, he's awesome, he's blah 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 blah. But he's emotionally abusive. And then sister, I'm like, that's the only con. So not necessarily that, but it's the sense of if your cons literally outweigh as in a quantity and outweigh as in quality.
Okay.
So if it's a thing of like, yes, he buys you gifts, he cooks for you, he opens the doors, he tells you he loves you every night, he tells you you're beautiful, he posts about it, he does all these cute stuff, but also every other night that he's upset, he tells you that he hates you and he doesn't love you and that you could be doing this and you're getting fat and you look like this and all this stuff. The cons are heavier than the amount of pros that you have. And I think that's what kind of borderlines the toxicity, because sometimes we think, okay, he's a majority of the time I'm happy, yes, but those rough times are really rough. And that draws into the line of, is that just a tough time or is it a toxic time? And so for me, I feel like once you start understanding that balance or realizing what is when you get into the case of like, should I stay? Do I see potential? Is this actual potential? Or is this me wanting there to be potential? And is there anything else you had to say? Or like, can I go into my long depth of me constantly talking 20?
I want to talk about your quantity quality red flag comment.
Okay.
So, how many tiny red flags is acceptable versus big red flags? Is there a point where they equate each other? Is it 5 tiny red flags to a big red flag? I know you can't quantify that. You can't be like 4 or 5. That you don't know. But yeah, you're right about the quality. I see it as a size because we're talking about flags.
Yeah.
Where this person has like 2 tiny red flags. Like don't run away. It's something, and I think the size of the red flag makes it easier to turn into a green flag.
I do agree with that.
So don't run away just because there's 2 tiny ones. Don't get me wrong. I don't know what your version of big and my version of big are. Like,
absolutely. I
don't know if my big red flag is picks their teeth after they eat, and your small red flag is they kick children. I don't know. But if that's your tiny red flag, we gotta have a talk. But like, everybody's different, okay? So what might affect me as a huge red flag could just affect a tiny red flag. You're like, that's true. I don't really mind people who pick their teeth as long as it's not in public. Mine is like, you touch your teeth after you eat, you're done. It's over with, like, So I don't even know what my question to you was.
I mean, the red flag. So my thing is that sometimes people perceive red flags differently, right? Perceive and perception, of course. And it may be a thing of like, okay, well, he comments on my weight here and there. It's not that big of a deal. But how does it make you feel in that moment? And that's how you quantify a red flag. And that's how you measure its harmfulness. Because it may be a thing of like, okay, let's say I walk up the stairs and you just like, hey, you look like you're getting a little chubby. And I'm like, okay. And then we move on. We're happy. The rest of the day, we're awesome. Next week, babe, are you gaining a little weight? How that makes me feel in the moment is sad. It's terrible. And the more that you hear it, the more you're like, am I gaining weight? Do I have to do something? I think, or maybe it's like, are you having more acne today? Like, have you tried putting on more makeup? Like, small things that are like, okay, well, he says it once every week. Like, it's not that big of a deal. But in that moment, if you comment on, like, me as a makeup artist, if you were to comment on every acne that popped up on my face and you're like, babe, you got acne, I'd be like, you know? But, no, but, like, seriously, it may be small, but the impact is how it makes you feel. So just because it happens small and you're like, oh, well, that's his only red flag, how does it make you feel? Because if it's a thing of, like, you're like, oh, babe, your acne is growing. And I'm like, babe, shut up. Like, leave me alone. And it doesn't do anything. Then that's one thing. But if I get insecure or I bottle up or I feel sad or it makes me want to cry, that's a big thing because now you're playing on my insecurities. And now I have to sit back and be like, okay, is that a small thing or is it a big thing for me? And then we hop into the thing of boundaries. Because now if I'm telling you what my insecurities are, or maybe you don't know, and I tell you after that, hey, babe, I didn't like the fact that you commented on my acne, you don't change it, we're hopping into toxic territory. And then so is that all that you had to say?
Yes, you can start.
I can go on my spiel. My spiel. So I think I like the fact that I thought y'all did a joke. Anyway.
Oh, camera?
I thought you did it on purpose, so I was like but so anyway, so let me get into my spiel, right? This is my time to shine. Hello.
Thanks for coming.
I think that we should speak on that change that you were saying. I do. I don't know if I can say you were saying because I said it, but we'll get into it. Right? Team effort.
You wouldn't be here without me, and I wouldn't be here without you.
Okay.
And we wouldn't be here without you.
Yeah. Okay, anyways. But I do think we should speak about change. Because I hear, myself, and I hear from my friends who are in relationships, getting into relationships, even myself. We've had conversations about it. Potential. Big word, potential. And my thing is, potential is great if you see movement, progression. Because you can sit there and be like, I see potential in him, I see potential in her, I see potential in them. You can say whatever you want to say. But if they're not making a steady change towards that so-called potential, you start falling into the line of toxicity. Because then we get into the space of, I'm telling you what you said hurt me. And you're not making movement towards ending it. And don't get me wrong. Like, I just want to preface it by saying that change doesn't come in a day. So if I had a grievance with you last night and I told you about it and you do it again today, I can't be upset with you. I mean, I can, but I can't be upset with you because, like, oh, you didn't change. I told you, you know? But at the same time, if I've told you last night, 3 weeks from now, you do it again. And then I'm like, babe, we've talked about this. Let's, another 3 weeks, you do it again. How many times am me as a individual, willing to allow you to continue to do this without saying, you're crossing boundaries. I've set them. Because then it becomes a thing of like, okay, well, I mean, if you see potential, he could do that forever. And you'd be like, well, change doesn't come in 3 weeks. Change doesn't come in 3 months. Change doesn't come... How long does it take? And our own personal experience, whenever I've told him anything, I've said, I don't like this, I see change rapidly. And, like, it sounds crazy, but I've seen change in, like, a week. Like... And it's insane because I'm not used to that, right? So I'm very much not used to that. And I was expecting to give you like 3 weeks, a month, 2 months, and expect, but you were like, you don't.
Do I have 2 months now?
No, you set the bar, baby. You set the bar. So it's like a thing of like, you did it in a week, and I'm like, okay, so people can do this. People can change. And I know that. I acknowledge that because you were able to do it. And for me, I've always been in situations where I thought, oh, it was just struggle love, right? Until I met you and I realized it was toxic love. And even then, when I came from a space of toxic relationships, I came into this one with the same mentality that you were going to be the exact same way. And when you were changing, it made me change. And I'm like, holy smokes, I've got to be better for this man. Like, this is my dream man. I can't lose him because I'm still being toxic. And so that's a great thing that you were saying, is that we have to not only, self-love, but self-realization, realize that we have flaws ourselves and move in that direction. And that's the key thing for me, is movement. If you're not seeing movement, progression, change, then you are in a cycle of just trouble. And when you have a cycle of trouble, struggle, toughness, that's toxic. And I think in the beginning of our relationship, there was bits of toxicity. I can very much admit it, because the off and on, it's very toxic. But then again, you were the one that was like, I know people probably like, oh girl, not you toxic, but you were the one that was like, I'm too grown for this. I'm like, you want to be in a relationship? Do you? Yes. Let's work on it. And again, change, progression, movement. If it was a thing of you sat there and you were like, babe, I don't want off and on. I'm not gonna lie to you, I don't want to do this. And I was like, okay. And then still trying to be off and on and off and on and off and on, and be like, I'm pulling away, I'm pushing it. That would be toxic. Because you set that boundary for me, and you're like, I'm grown, I don't want to do this. If I didn't show any progression at all, it would be toxic, because again, cycle of toughness. And so I'm not saying like leave if you spot a bit of toxicity. Everyone has a bit of toxicity. Those red flags are all toxic. But it's how you go about getting rid of that toxicity for me. Like, because a lot of people tell you like, oh, we had that toughness in the beginning of our relationship. We had struggle, but we got through it, and now we have the happiest relationship. We were one of those people. Loved it. But there's also people who are like, you shouldn't have to go through that stage in order to be happy. And I completely agree. Like, not every relationship is going to have its tough stages. There's some people who genuinely have never fought, and I'm like, how? But,
there are.
What's her name? That shall not be named, because I believe she was shown out as racist on YouTube.
So,
yeah.
Was that? I guess bad people can have perfect
relationship. I mean, if you're a bad person with another bad person,
I guess.
But either way, they came out. When I used to love her, they came out and they were like, we've never fought. Like, we don't argue. We just communicate. And I feel as though it's because they're older, and once you hit past 25, you become more mature, your brain is fully developed. There's no reason for you to be doing that childish mentality, the childish acts and all this stuff. The older you are, the more likely you are to communicate with your partner. Hands down, right? Some people don't. But they said they never argued. And I'm like, good for y'all. If it works, it works. And I'm sure there's other people who have the same thing. But being honest, there's always going to be trouble. There's always going to be struggle in your relationship. Not always, but majority of relationships, there's going to be struggle. There's going to be problems. It's about how you go about those problems, listening to your partner, and communicating with your partner. And I don't think it stops at communication, but it's actually listening and changing from those. Like, I'm like, I don't like this. Okay. Now you gotta change it so that it doesn't happen again. And if it does happen again, that's fine. Like, it's people don't change in a day. But at the same time, if it's constantly happening, then it becomes a problem. And I've had conversation with some of my friends and stuff like that about like that level of how much are you willing to put in. And me as someone who is like, I don't want to say guru, but relationship like person. I don't know why it came to that, but I was like the relationship person. And a lot of my friendships, I feel as though, if not all, had the same problem of, well, they're doing this. And I'm like, okay, well, have you told them about it? Yes. So what are they doing to change it? And they're like, well, I mean, and then it comes down to, okay, it's fine if they're not changing right away, but how long are you willing to put up with it of them not changing? And I think that becomes a problem with a lot of people, because then they're like, oh, well, you know, like, they did this for me, so maybe I can give them. No. Like, being honest, no. If your answer is past 2 to 3 times, you are now in the toxic stage, because you have to have more self-worth, self-respect, self-love for yourself to realize that you should not be putting up with this person who's doing it past 3 times. Because if it's past 3 times, honestly, if it's past 2 times, because it should be a thing of like, hey, I don't like this, you do it again, and I'm like, hey, remember I said I don't like this? And you're like, damn it, you're right. And then one more time and be like, I've told you twice already. It's 3 strikes, you're out. And then once that, good.
Okay.
But if it's a continuous cycle,
yes,
and you're just allowing it,
so having it happen constantly in a short enough period of time, is toxicity. How do you deal with someone who has changed, but it periodically pops up again? Like just they slip up once in like 6 months, one more time in like a year. Like, it's not often, but it's like they forget. And happens
anger,
again. And then you're like, whoa, like, we talked about that. Oh, sorry, I apologize, I made a mistake. And they come back.
That's it though. Okay. That's the thing though. Accountability on top of realizing that people are humans and we're gonna make mistakes and we're gonna falter. That's the thing with it, is that it's a thing of like, okay, well, people make mistakes, but how often, right? Now, if it's a thing of they've changed and they slip up, people get angry. Trauma responses. All, like, there's so many things on top of being a human that sometimes people really do forget. And even if they kind of remember, it's still like a little shut off. If you really trigger them to the point, they say something that you don't like. But it's how they respond to it. So that's a huge, like, it's like this much, right? Because it can go into the thing of like love bombing, because it can be like a thing of, I told you this, and be like, oh babe, I'm so sorry, and all this stuff, and then they send you flowers and all this stuff. But it's how often they do it. So if it's a thing of you have a period of them changing, not doing it again, and then they slip up because they're so angry, and you're like, really? And they're like, I'm so sorry. You know, I completely forgot. I was so angry. I take full accountability. I apologize. And then never do it again. And then maybe slip up in another year. People are humans. People are that's fine. Now, if it's a thing of you told them this week, they slipped up next week, and they're like, I'm sorry, I won't do it again. They do it again the next week. I'm sorry, I won't do it again. Now you're in a pattern. You're in a cycle. That's the toxicity. It's when you're in a cycle that you cannot break away from. And that's what I label as toxic, because I'm like, I don't want to be in a reoccurring cycle of an apology and then you doing it again, you know? And let's say there isn't an apology, you still doing it again. Either way, you doing something that I have made clear I don't like. I have set multiple boundaries. Honestly, therapists will tell you once somebody crosses your boundary once, they should be gone. But as a human being, we love people, and so we give them a few strikes. That's fine, but don't allow your love for somebody to create cloudiness in their boundary crossing. I'm trying to find a way to say that, but you know, like, don't allow them to cross your boundary so much that it becomes a thing of like,
instead of being a boundary and just a line on the ground.
A line, yeah.
A gate, a fence with a gate.
Because again, you tell children something once, they don't listen, and you're like, I told you this and all this stuff, and you try to discipline them the second time that you told them not to, and then they do it again. That's a child. That's a literal child, and the thing is, you have to do that again. And again and again and again to a child. So if you as a grown adult, I'm having to correct you over and over and over, I am now in a relationship with a child. And that is a problem. I don't want to have to correct you like a parent. I want to speak to you like a partner. So if I'm saying, babe, I told you this, babe, I told you this, babe, I told you this, you're my child. If I'm saying, babe, I don't like this, and you change it, you're my partner. And that's the key to communication, is not only speaking, but listening and understanding. So now if I'm telling you I don't like this, and you're like, okay, I hear you, don't do it again, we're fine. If you told me vice versa, I don't do it again, we're fine. But I feel like that's the big thing. And even in communication, it can get toxic too. If you're just letting me talk and you're like, yeah, I hear you, but I don't like no. And even in apologies and accountability, but I always say, I tell all my friends, I tell my family, I tell everyone, if you apologize to me and there's a but after, it invalidates everything that you said before. So you have to be careful with communication too, because just because you're speaking to each other and you're communicating doesn't mean you're changing that. Ooh. Just because you're speaking to each other doesn't mean you're communicating. I want to say that because communication is speaking, receiving. So that is a communication. If the other person is not receiving what you're saying, then you're not communicating, and vice versa. So if you're saying stuff and all this stuff and they're like, yeah, I hear you, but you invalidate everything that you said before.
A lot of people.
So therefore, you weren't listening to me.
Exactly. They only listen to respond.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's not good.
It's not good. You do. And a lot of people do that, and that's what creates toxicity, is you're listening to have a response for what I said.
You're not listening to understand. Because understand.
Yeah.
You know, that's you're so right about the toxicity is the repetition in a small window kind of thing. And if you're just, I guess I'm gonna say, hearing your partner out just so you can speak. Like you're just waiting your turn to speak.
Just as not
you're not in the right. Like it's okay. It's okay to not like criticism.
Absolutely.
Right. It's because no one. I don't think everybody loves criticism. Like criticism is basically just I guess a response to something you've done or said, whatever. Like this is something that I don't think is correct, or it didn't look right, or whatever. So that's what criticism is. And I'm not saying you should be able to take criticism from the jump, but don't react so aggressively and so. Okay.
Yeah, just choking on water.
Okay. Don't just burst out right after their criticism. You know, like it's not that you and don't. One thing I think we had to actually get through is holding on to things, because there was like a problem would happen, instead of bringing it up, we'd hold on to it until the other person criticized us, and then we'd be like, well, you used to do this, or you did it. Don't be that way, because what it is that you haven't communicated that something rubbed you the wrong way. And so between the span of you bringing it up to them, it could happen again and again and again and again, and they don't know that they're doing it. So when they criticize you, you're like, well, you did this and this and this and this time. They didn't know. You know, so I think communication is important, and not just hearing the person and not just waiting to respond. It's understanding, taking in what they have said, and reflecting on it to try to improve or change something in a way that is positive. You know, if it's criticism about something you're doing that's good, like don't change that.
I know.
But if it's something that is affecting your partner negatively, and you agree that, hey, this thing is not beneficial. Like, oh, I do yell. I do raise my voice when I'm agitated, or when I get excited, I am swinging my hands, and
that triggers me.
Them,
like,
you know? Like take that in and understand where they're coming from, understand their perspective, and how they perceive your actions and thoughts and voice levels and stuff, and try to make, because you want your partner to be comfortable and you want them to feel safe. Okay, so it's important to create that space, because in a safe, comfortable environment, there's growth. Because we've been watching a lot of like nature shows lately.
Yeah.
And one thing you realize is that everything depends on each other.
Yeah.
And yes, they're predators in the environment, whatever, but they help out something else along the way.
They all still work together in
exactly.
some way.
So some version of it is that it's safe and secure, so there's growth and there's change happening. So yeah, just understanding. Okay, listen to understand, listen to grow, listen to try to improve upon what was mentioned, and don't just listen so that you have something to fire back. Don't hold on to things to fire back. Communication, in my opinion, is best as soon as possible.
Absolutely.
Yes, because when time is passing between, that's when repetition can happen. You know, also. So, hey, you brought it up to me once, but in that time, I whatever you were talking about happened 8 times. Like 8 times, but I didn't know. You just mentioned it now. You know, so as soon as possible is a really good communication kind of thing.
I love that you were saying that about like not telling, they don't know. If you don't tell them, they don't know. I think that's extremely important as well, because I find that a lot of the communication that I have with males is that they're like, okay, well, she's nagging me and stuff like this and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, well, do you tell her your grievances? And they're like, no, I don't really want to do that. And I'm like, it works on both ends, as the same with women or female partners. It's the same thing. Whereas if you don't tell your partner what's wrong with you, she is not gonna change. They're not gonna change because they won't know to change. And the same thing goes with men. Is a huge thing I feel like in the male community is they're unable to communicate and speak up, and that's the way society has created men. It's like you kind of are like, ooh, I almost cursed. You're sensitive if you talk or if you speak up and say, like, I feel like that was a struggle in our relationship, is you speaking up when things bothered you, and you're like, well, I don't want to hurt your feelings. What? To
interrupt, and on the flip side, I think the world has encouraged, well, I don't, this might come off from the wrong way, but encouraged women, women to be
women's fine, girls,
a little fragile. And so, on top of men being unable to speak, they feel like if they do say something to the girl, and it does happen that you do bring up your grievances to the girl, she shuts down because, you know, it's not that there's a lack of there might be a lack of accountability. There might be a lack of, they've never been criticized before, because maybe people in the past have let them walk entirely all over their partners. So then when you do bring it up to them, they're like shocked, and it turns into a fight or something because they've never been approached in the point where they're wrong.
Okay, now I'm here.
Okay, yeah, no.
That almost set me. I was like,
no.
But I'm understanding what you're trying to say. Yeah.
If their previous partners have never criticized or told them, hey, this is not right, but then you do it.
I think it coincides.
Yes. So, and that's the thing, because of perspective. Yeah. Whatever. Maybe in his last relationship, he did speak up. And maybe she did shut down, and maybe it did turn into a fight. So now he's wary about doing it again, and so now he's in a relationship where he doesn't speak up no matter what's happening, and maybe he shuts down, and it's like, and so she's complaining that, oh, my boyfriend doesn't do anything, blah, 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 blah. Like, he's quiet, keeps himself, he doesn't talk to me, but he's afraid to, you know? So I think it's important. That's back to communication, where even if there is no issue, communicate.
I agree.
You never know. Even if it's not talking about an issue between y'all, you might get them to speak about an issue elsewhere in their life.
Yeah.
You know, so I think that's why it's always important to communicate with your partner,
no matter what.
Not just on the issues, but on the good stuff.
On the good
too.
stuff,
like,
yeah.
Just ask about their day, like what's going on, because you are right. A lot of men are conditioned not to speak about their feelings.
Yeah.
And it's from both ends, where women are like, "Oh, you're soft," but also from men, it's like, "Oh, you're soft." So, because I've heard the complaint that men aren't masculine anymore. Yeah, from women that what is it? Your soft boy era, and all of this like criticisms from women, and then you also see comments of men saying, "Bring masculinity back."
Yeah,
like make it okay to be a man again, and it's like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
What is masculinity? Like, I'm sure the guy sharing his feelings can cut wood. I'm sure he can fix
if that's what masculinity is.
Like that's the thing. Like what, based on their definition of masculinity, it's shooting a gun, it's hunting, gathering. No, it's hunting, no gathering. Gathering is for women. Apparently.
Being into cars, you have to be into cars.
No, but driving a manual and fighting a bear,
taking out the trash,
growing a mustache. Like it's like there's no definition of masculinity because there's always been the complaint of a lack of masculinity.
Yeah.
You look throughout history, and there's always complaint of lack of masculinity because with the growth of technology and machines and whatever, work has generally become easier.
Yeah,
which is a good thing.
Which I think so.
You know, so with just masculinity shifts, and I think there's a lot of toxicity on all ends. That's like masculinity is going away. Bring masculinity back. Men aren't masculine anymore. Men are soft. Men are crying. And then the complaint is, oh, men are rigid. They don't talk to us. No. And it's because the world has told men, hey, don't cry. Don't show emotions. Grit your teeth and bear it. And it is what it is. And now it's canon event. It's a canon event. And it's just men's mental health is such a deep topic, and it isn't approached often, and there's so much happening. It's just I don't know like communicate with your partner.
No, I get what you're saying, and I want to just bounce back to that like women fragile thing, because that triggered me, which I'm sure triggered a lot of other women. I was like, huh? But I feel as though I understand what you're saying. It's the idea that men aren't able to communicate. So therefore, a lot of relationships end up with no communication for men. So women are then used to not hearing things.
And not
right?
being criticized.
Not being
criticized.
So then when men do finally speak up, we're like, you're criticizing me.
I think that can
okay.
happen,
Okay. Then okay.
Yeah, I wasn't calling women fragile.
No, I know.
Y'all give birth, and I don't want to do that. You know, so there's a lot more as well. But it's just no, I wasn't calling women fragile. No. It's just I was thinking of the word pretty privilege. Right? Hold on. Where, hey, you've been hot your whole life. Like a huge generalization. I'm not saying all hot girls don't get criticized. Okay? I'm just saying that let's say you are attractive. So men view you as a prize and oh my god, she spoke to me. Oh, I got a 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
Why would I do anything to jeopardize my 10 out of 10?
10, yeah.
Like I'm not gonna tell her she drives badly and she's hit 42 cars in this year alone. I'm not going to tell her that she's abusive. She scratches me with her nails all the time. I'm going to grit my teeth and bear it because I got a 10 out of 10. I got a baddie, you know? So it's like, that happen. In my opinion, that can happen where, he's afraid to lose what he has, so he doesn't speak up.
I also think in the case of that, where I do feel as though men aren't able to communicate their feelings because society is really cruel to men sometimes, and even there has like, and you know, going back to last week's episode of social media has created a safe space for a lot of men, with women who are saying like, speak up, we want you to open up to us, we want you to speak to us, and we want you to communicate. And there are men in the comments that are like, oh, we can defend ourselves, we can defend, and I'm like, why are you so hostile? That's the thing.
It's not just like, it's not women.
No, it's
talking about masculinity. It's also men.
It's men, and a lot of the times, like, I hate to generalize it, but it's within, you know, the black community of like black men, because again, that's how we grew up. We were raised that black men were.
I was thinking you would say.
What were you thinking I was saying?
Conservative white men. I'm thinking specifically.
Okay. No, listen. We all knew that. I didn't need to say that one.
That man dipping his ice cream into sprinkles.
Oh no. Okay, listen. All the conservatives just think men who are in there are fruity and all this. They're
crazy.
That doesn't need to be said.
Okay. But yeah, no, I do
feel as though in the black community, and again, I don't blame them. It's how we were raised. Men were supposed to be the breadwinners and take care of the household and all this stuff, and women were the ones that would feed the kids and cook the meals and stuff like that. And so I feel like it's a huge backlash, especially on like more black men, because it's like you have to be that dominant, especially with what's going on in the world right now. You have to protect the women. You have to, and I also feel like it also falls on women too, because then it comes into the space of we're nagging, we're complaining, we're talking too much, we're saying our grievances too much, and that creates a problem, because it's like when it sounds like a woman is always nagging you and you're not speaking, it's gonna, or I don't want to say that. When a woman is constantly saying her grievances and you're not saying anything, it sounds like she's nagging. It's always going to sound like a woman is nagging you if you are not speaking up on it for yourself. It'd be like, well, and then you have the thing of like, well, I mean, I don't tell you when you did that. Tell me. Like, please tell me so that I can change. And then we fall into the thing of women are naggers. Women nag. Women do this and women do that. And it hurts both of us in the long run, because then I start going quiet and I start falling back, and then that may be a thing that you may see of women like shutting down, not necessarily because her last relationship didn't have a man who dinged her, but because it falls into the space of, well, I'm nagging you. I don't want to nag you. I don't want to do this. Absolutely. I don't know. Mostly both. If not, always both. You know, it could be both in any situation. I mean, the guy had a relationship where when he did speak up, he was, you know, met with combat and oh my gosh and all this stuff. It falls onto both ends of, and I feel like it all boils down to society and stuff like that. But we've gone a long way from toxic. But I do feel as though I feel like, honestly, society is what creates toxicity, if not creates the, like, idea that what you're going through isn't toxic. Like, it is. And it can be in every situation. And the same thing with, like, communication is speak up. Everyone needs to speak up, be open, and be honest. And when it happens, speak up about it, like as soon as it happens, because somebody can't change anything if you don't speak on it, and vice versa is I can't speak up or I'm tired of speaking up if you're not changing, and then it becomes, you know, so it's a huge thing of like cycling. Is it a cycle, and how long is it a cycle? You know, if it's a thing of like they change and they mess up one time in the next year, you don't have to be upset with them. You don't have to go all crazy and stuff like that or whatever. But if it's a constant thing, quick, and a cycle, then you start moving into the thing of like, that's toxic. And then you have to sit back and be like, am I willing to push through this because I see potential? Or a thing of like, let me acknowledge that this is toxic and I have to do better for myself.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Is that all you had to say?
That's all I had to say.
Alrighty then. I enjoyed this conversation. It took multiple turns, but I feel as though that it was good. It was needed. I think it was necessary, and even the communication about men and masculinity.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's extremely important, and
Yeah.
I think we need to start speaking up about it a lot more. Because I think that this generation is going to a great place, and I feel as though we need to continue to go there, but it's hard with the older generation. So I enjoyed this conversation. I think we need to have it, and if you are in a situation where you're like, am I just going through that tough stage, or is this toxic? Think about cycles. Think about how quickly it's happening. Are they listening to you? Are you communicating? Are you both communicating? Are you both listening and receiving? And that's everything that we had to say. Hope you guys like this. Maybe you didn't agree with us. Maybe you did. Comment down below
in the comments.
Yeah, tell us.
We read them and we reply.
We do. We absolutely do. And we love to read your comments. We love to know how you think about it. Maybe you completely disagree with what he said, or maybe you completely disagree with what I said. Let us know. Start that conversation. Can't wait to see what you guys comment. Can't wait to see if you guys liked it as much as we enjoyed filming this. We will see you guys next week. Please come back if you're new. Thank you for staying if you aren't. And is that all, babe?
Yeah, like, comment, subscribe.
All right, guys. Bye.
Bye, guys.